All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Growth by Shawn podcast. So, I've got the privilege of sitting down with Lyssa Scott today. And in terms of introducing her, it was difficult to find one specific thing that you do. What I did was I just wrote down a bunch of things. Tell me if it's on point or if we need to change something. Expert on brand design, media, funnels, sales strategy. Did I miss anything? Did I get anything wrong to start?
Yeah, it really all comes back into that personal branding piece and all the components that go into it. We'll get into, I'm sure, some of the journey, but that was spot on. You're a rock star.
Beautiful. So thank you for hopping on with me.
Yeah.
And why don't you just give us a little bit about who you are and what we do, that way you have a better understanding of who we're sitting and chatting with, and then we'll get more into personal brand and what that is and why you do that and how you help people do that, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I zoom out on what I'm doing, everything has one common thread. I am one of those people, just like you said, that people are like, you do so much, you're a little all over the place. Like, I'm like, yes, that's what it's like to be an artist and an athlete and an explorer of the world. I don't know what to tell you, right? Multifaceted. And I know you're that way too. And so what I always say is it's really one thing, and that is elevating others with their gifts and helping them share their gifts with the world. And so what form that takes on has changed over the years, but the what remains the same. And so initially I entered the entrepreneurship scene as a fitness and nutrition coach. And it was like, let's get your body in check so you can show up for your family, show up for your job, show up for your passions. And then it became more of like a life coaching adventure, right? Where it was habits and nutrition and sleep and stress and all the things. And again, that was still like, how do we do life at maximum potency? I mean, that's the name of my company, Maximum Potency. And it was like, how do we rip on life? And then I was like, well, they also need financial freedom and they also need, and so I was like, okay, this is getting too crazy. And so I really dove into that piece of you need resources in order to live your best life. And so how do we do business coaching, but not just how do we make money? Not how do we buy a car wash or, boring businesses like Cody Sanchez always talks about, but how do we take your gifts and create an income and an occupation around them in a way that brings you joy, that brings you time abundance, that brings you location freedom. And so I got obsessed with this concept of 24-hour work week. And I had this program called the 24-hour Business Builder. That was a six-figure program, right? That program alone sold six figures of business. And so it's super cool to see that really explode. And then recently, that offer, I'll be fully transparent, stopped selling. And I was like, what the heck? Like, did what people want change? Did people change? Did the coaching space change? Is it like, what's going on? And what I realized was that I needed to come back to my creative roots, which was my corporate job. And I had always done this kind of like I was building funnels and doing sales strategy as I was helping with the business coaching. But this year we really doubled down on the logos, the actual visual brand, the website design, personal styling, office styling. Who are you on and off the screen, right? Because I want all of my clients and friends to be dynamic beings that don't just exist on Zoom. And so it's been super cool to really bring it full circle and come back into this place where I'm half coach, half creative, doing a multitude of things on and off screen and helping my clients do the same. So I hope that's a
Yeah,
good high level overview without going too deep.
yeah,
But yeah, it's a lot of stuff. So
yeah.
we're loving it.
The biggest thing that stuck out to me that I'd love to begin with, because a lot of things start with our offer. And so when you looked at your 24-hour business, when do you know it's time to, hey, I need a new offer, or I need to start some type of new model or some type of new insert creation, and it's time to leave the last one in the past?
Yeah, I was literally writing a post on this last night, so I'm super happy that you asked this. Um, Number one, if it was selling like a hot cake and it stopped selling like a hot cake, right? So, I mean, even think about something as silly as like Yeti cups. Yeti cups stopped selling and Stanley cups started selling. They're the same product but different, right? And so it's kind of like there's always a trend in the market, more or less, whether that's the cup you're drinking out of or the coaching service that you're using. And one of the first things that told me that this was broken was I got on 15 sales calls and 15 no's in a row. Now, your girl's close rate is between 50 and 75. It's not because I can't sell. It's not because I was talking to the wrong people. Over and over again, I heard money objections, money objections, money objections. A few were, this isn't the right program. This wasn't what I was looking for. And that's normal. That's the normal 25% that says no. They like want someone to hold their hand. It's not a one-on-one program, or they don't need a funnel, or they don't want to do DMs, or whatever it is, right? Sometimes somebody's like, this isn't my style. All good, no worries. But when I got those 15 no's in a row, I panicked. I was like, is my whole business breaking? Like, what? Right. And it felt like it was blindsiding me because 2 months ago it was working. And so that was the first thing. Then I started to look around the space at my peers, and I noticed that every single coach that I was friends with in person had a part-time job or a full-time job. And I was like, that's interesting. That means that we are all probably in a place of needing to supplement our income right now. I'm not special. So kind of taking that. Then I started looking at what people who are ahead of me in the game were doing, seven-figure business owners, right? And I heard from my personal mentor at the time that her program stopped working and her funnel stopped working last year too. And she didn't have a six-figure offer that she had made six figures from. She had a seven-figure offer that she was burning to the ground. And so I was very leaned in that moment of going, okay, this isn't me. And so I think it's like removing yourself from that, but then also being dedicated enough to go, okay, but then what is it? So it stopped selling. You're seeing other people in the space have the same thing happen to them. And then number three, you start to have this feeling of like, I need to remix this because this work needs to exist in the world. And right now it's essentially sitting in the basement, is what I always say. It's like you've already created the course or the video modules or the worksheets or the whatever. And now you don't have clients coming in the front doors. So it's not getting used. And that brings you pain. If that brings you peace that it's not getting used, you're like, oh, thank God I didn't want to teach that anymore. Or, oh, like I was getting so burnt out from, in my instance, nutrition coaching. When I stopped having nutrition leads, I was like, hallelujah. In fact, I was turning away nutrition leads, right? So there's different reasons for pivots, but in this scenario that you're asking about, it was very much the market told me it was time for something new. And so I remixed into a monthly membership. I rebuilt a website. I put 15 hours into market research calls, right? Like launched the program, 0 sales.
Mm-hmm.
What? So you don't always get it right on the first remix. And then we remix it again and we go, okay, people want done for you services and they want tangible results. Meaning they want to walk away with a website or a logo they want to walk away with something they can touch, feel, see, right?
Mm-hmm.
As soon as I went back into that more tangible, people started paying me like crazy again. And I was like, this is wild. I don't know if you want to analyze this here and now, but I think it has to do with the economy of people being like, hey, I don't just want to pay to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
I want more than just accountability. I want more than just a check-in. I want more than just a video call a week. And as soon as I really got nitty-gritty on like the deliverables and again, like those done for you services and pairing them together, we're booked out till August right now. It's May 8th. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, hell yeah, right? And you
Yeah.
know when it's clicking and when it's not. And one of the biggest things is just not taking that personal.
Yep.
It's not. It's just business.
Yeah. That's awesome. And so with that, I mean, we could dive into, I think it's more beneficial if we went through where all of these different business offerings, when they're happening, when you have you as the brand, how did that shift through each different business offering that you've had?
Yeah. Are you talking about this year? Are you talking about like the overall landscape of like fitness to now?
Well, I was first thinking like the fitness and nutrition to now, but
Yeah.
if you need to condense it a little bit, I'm happy to just go into, whichever one you want to go into.
Yeah.
But I think that give a
Yeah. I
good
think,
layout for people of how to like how you've had uh a lot of different brand shifts, identity shifts, and molded that to you and your offers.
yeah. So first of all, I think humans, and this is not just in business, just human in general, we're a lot more fluid than we think. We think we're one thing and we grow and we shift all the time. And to not honor that feels like death, feels like anxiety, feels like disease manifesting in the body. I mean, we could go down a whole esoteric hole of what it means to not honor yourself in real time, right? So that was a piece of it for me from the get-go. It was like, as an entrepreneur, when I started Maximum Potency in 2018, I was like, this thing is going to grow and morph on its own. And I had pre-surrendered to that. I was at peace with that. I wasn't married to like, I'm going to be the greatest nutrition coach of all time. And I'm going to grow into like a weighing against gravity level certification program with like hundreds of clients. I never wanted that. I wanted location freedom. I wanted abundance. I wanted to love what I did every day. And I was committed to using my gifts. And actually, in that season, this is interesting, I was feeling conflicted because I wasn't using my design skills other than for my own page. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm such a good designer and graphics and social media. And I'm just like putting that to the side while I do this. And then I was like, I'll come back to it. Right. And so it's kind of like playing an instrument maybe in high school and you like stop playing, you feel a little guilty. And then you're like, oh, I could always pick the guitar back up or whatever. That happened to me too. So vision, vehicle, values. That is my language for essentially what Simon Sinek talks about in Start With Why. I don't particularly love that book. I think it could be a lot more condensed and short and sweet, but the point is know why you're doing things, right? And so my why and my what really haven't changed. Help people share their gifts and elevate themselves to live life at maximum potency. That's the what. The why, integrity and freedom, right? Freedom and growth. Those are kind of like the top 3 values: integrity, freedom, and growth. Okay, cool. The vehicle can change 100 times over. Permission for the vehicle to be fluid. Permission for the vehicle to change with the market. Like, don't be like Kodak and not pivot, right? They didn't pivot with the market. They almost went extinct because they didn't go digital. And like, okay. So in my mind, that is how the pivots were possible instead of clunky. It was like, does this still do this? Yes. And someone listening to this episode might be like, oh my gosh, she's done so much. But 2019 was like 6 years ago, 5 years ago, or 2018 was 6 years ago. It's not like I was changing this every 3 weeks. And I want to stress that. Like, I would do things for a year or 2 or 4 at a time, right? I wasn't pivoting like a spider monkey would pivot. I was pivoting like, oh, this is a conscious choice that I've sat with. And so, like I said, the fitness and nutrition, that whole business, it was hilarious. I accidentally signed 12 clients and had no idea how to do it again. I was like, this is wild. This online thing works. Like, oh my God, like strangers are DMing me. It was like the Wild West 2018, 2019 on Instagram, right? 2019, a lot of more coaches, I think, joined the space. And that's when I realized, like, I'm going to have to be a little bit more dialed in if I'm going to keep doing this. And then I also started to feel like I didn't just want to teach people how to do a squat. I was a CrossFit coach, and how to eat their greens and have the same conversation. I was having the same conversation over and over again all day, which was good because I was calling in ideal clients, right? They all had the same problem, but it was terrible for my mental health. And when 2020 happened, I really felt called into an expansion of not just strength and nutrition, but the easiest jumping off point for me at that point was I had read Own the Day by Aubrey Marcus. And that was about sleep and stress and even your interactions with weed and alcohol and like how to optimize your days. And I was like, oh, I'll do like human optimization. This is going to be sick, right? And so I didn't call myself that because that's not what my ideal client was saying. I just said, rip on life, share your gifts and talents with the world. Like basically your health begins with you. And if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. And so it was this habits, intentions, nutrition, and fitness. I had 10 ladies enrolled in that at roughly $6K each. So we did $60,000 in business in that in less than 3 months. It was like boom, boom, boom. Container was full. And I started to go, I don't have a lot of time to do anything else because I was still personal training. I was still CrossFit coaching. I was still waitressing. And during 2020, when I stopped waitressing because the gym was closed, which I had a key to it, so I still used it. And what's it called? The restaurant was closed. But anyway, the journey of that was so powerful because it was my first attempt at a pivot where it was seamless. No one was like, why are you talking about habits? It was so naturally the next thing for me to talk about. No one was saying, why are you talking about intentions? Because I had already been talking about nutrition, which was intentional, and training, which was intentional. It was like, oh, I'm putting language to things I've been walking the walk on anyway. So that didn't even feel crazy. What did feel crazy is I had those 6 women, and then I had 2 guys, and then there was 2 ladies that joined like later. So I had 10 clients mid 2020. 9 out of these 10 clients look at me in a 10-day span and they all go, so we're doing the intentions piece of their program. And they're like, I think I want to start a business like you did. Like, could you help me with that? And I was like, oh, I'm being summoned. Like, yes, we could do a logo and like a brand message and like a content strategy. This was all back of my hand stuff. And yeah, we could probably make an offer. We could probably, yeah, we could do that. Yeah, I've made like 150 grand in the past like 9 months. I could probably teach you how to make your first 60, right? It was this humble promise. I was like a beginner's business coach. And then as my clients grew with business, I started to go, oh shit, I got to stay on my game or they're going to outgrow me. And
Mhm.
that's when I started studying sales and funnels so that I could really help them crank cash flow into their business with the strategy side, not just the artsy, hippie, right brain side,
Mhm.
which is valuable, but it kind of after 12 weeks loses its luster a little bit. So like the pivots were seamless. It's like the world was asking them of me, God was asking them of me, and I was just there to be a vessel and again be fluid and not be white knuckling like, but I said I was a nutrition coach, right? And so it's kind of been this journey of humility and listening rather than these like, it's not like I'm sitting up in my castle making these grand plans for world domination and I'm like, you know what'll get the market? A business coaching offer. It was very much, again, what is your market? And your
Mhm.
market is not the market that you pick, but the people that are in your life.
Mhm.
Who are the people that are following you? Who are the people that you know from the gym? Who are the people that are in your neighborhood? What do they need? And how are you willing to overlap your service and your gifts with their needs? And that's simply what it's been over and over again with the same mission or the same checkpoint mentally of, does this help other people elevate and rip on life? If
Mhm.
yes, I'm probably willing to help with it. If no, I'm not your girl,
Mhm.
right? Which is why I stopped waitressing. It's why I stopped serving alcohol. It's why I stopped serving seed oil foods. It's why I don't work in any fluorescent lighting. I mean, there's 100 levels of my lifestyle that are not aligned.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, so what is aligned, right? And without going into things I stand against, you can imagine that the corporate life, I'll never go back to it because I
Mhm.
literally can't. I'm just like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, this is so crazy. So
Yeah.
that was a rant and a half. So sorry.
No, 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 that's okay because like you're here as the guest and this is who we want to hear, right? People can come onto this podcast and or as I should say, listen to me rant and rave anytime they want, but this is going to be an exclusive like Lyssa Scott. So there's so many different things that we can take and how there's so many pivots that you had taken in terms of brand identity offerings and for you they've been so seamless, but I think for a majority of people they're not as seamless. I don't know whether that's because they give up too early or more based along the lines of what you were saying at towards the end where I don't think what they're creating is in alignment with them from the get-go. I think that's more of a bigger um, issue, for lack of a better term. So this really is going to lead me into one of the few questions that I wrote down to prepare. So I was actually going through your one of your free guides before this.
Yeah.
And so a question that came to me was, and I think this is a good transition, is how deep and what parts of yourself did you need to explore in order to create a brand that actually feels you?
Yeah, beautiful question. And beautiful segue. It is really the difference of whether or not it works, so to speak. Was it aligned or was it somebody else's idea from the beginning? Was it
Mhm.
a you should or was it an I have to or an I get to or an I need to, right? Was it from within or was it from without? And so I think it's like interesting to think through some of that. If you are starting a business, and I'm careful to say you should or you
Mhm.
need to, but if you are starting a business because other people are telling you to go start the business versus if you are starting the business because you can't live with yourself if you don't, there's a really good indicator right there. And so I went against the advice of a lot of family and friends when I quit my corporate job and started this. But the question, what if I don't, haunted me and made me cry and made me dig. To answer your question about creating a brand that reflects your truest self, though, let's talk about this. Great question. The knowing yourself has to come first. And there's things that I can do to assist you, and there's questions I can sit and ask you, and we can brainstorm and extract. But ultimately, your answers to those questions, how quality those answers are, come from how well do you know yourself, right? And I was cracked open at 15 when my dad passed away. I looked at myself very deeply those next 4 years. And even when I was 16 years old, people would say, you just seem so like set in your ways in a good way. Like you just seem like you know your yes and you know your no, and you know what you like to wear and you know what you like to do, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I said, well, yeah, we think we get 75 years and my dad got 41. So yeah, I am gonna fight for what I want. And no, I don't care your opinion. And it was like this tough skin over this pure heart, right? Where like my heart was so big, but I was so like, I don't care what you think about it, and I think that served me really well as an entrepreneur. Um, so I knew myself really well. I was able to say, and I say this to people all the time, tell me about you when you were 4 or 5 or 6. There were things that you were naturally drawn to, not because the world told you to be, because you don't really get that till you're like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, where the whole like what other people think kind of kicks in. So who were you before the world told you who to be is a really good question. And this might seem unrelated. You might feel like, I don't know, I liked sidewalk chalk and BMX bikes and like, I don't know, I was a kid. Okay, well, what do those things represent to you now? Oh, they represent freedom or recklessness or art or color. Like, what were the things you were drawn to? When I was 4, I used to say I want to be an author, a speaker, and a teacher. That's because the world of online coaching didn't exist. That's what I always say, right? 1995, nobody was like, I don't think I can coach, but I am, and I'm an author, a
Hmm.
speaker, and a teacher. And so it's so interesting how those natural inclinations follow us and grow with us. And I think when we honor those, it's even things like, are you right-brained or left-brained? Are you analytical and logical, or are you more ethereal and esoteric? And so knowing that, knowing what colors bring you joy. Go look in your closet. What color did you buy over and over and over? For a lot of guys, it's black or navy blue. Cool, let's build off of that. Let's not try and go. And there's a theme in this episode, and it's don't look at what the market's telling you to be. Bring what you are and find the overlap in the market, right? And a lot of people will say, like, oh, but market research. But if you build a brand around orange and you fucking hate orange, you're going to be like, oh, my stuff looks like crap. You're not going to be as confident selling it, right?
Hmm.
So it can't go off of the marketing guru. It has to go off of your heart. And in order to know your heart, you got to get still, right? I've
Hmm.
gone on retreats. I worked with a coach. I rarely drop a name of who I worked with, but Graham Lickner, best coach I ever worked with, he made me sit still. And the even better part was he said, we're going to grow your business. I'm going to teach you how to do this. He did not tell me, I'm going to make you sit still, or I would have never paid him. But he knew the whole time this girl needs to chill out and sit still and get clear if she's going to go far, right? Smooth, what is it? Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. One of those moments. If he had told me that we were going to meditate and journal and go for a walk every day, and that's why my business was going to grow, I would have been like, I don't need this program.
Hmm.
He told me, no, 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 the result is going to be what the result is going to be. I'm not telling you how we're doing it. I thought that was so genius. Um, those were not word for word, but that was the gist, right?
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I think it's knowing yourself and then continuing to be curious and know yourself even more. And then asking yourself, how do we visually represent that? Which is where someone like I can come in because it's not really easy. I think for most people, I think this is kind of like this is one of my gifts is being able to sit with you and go like, oh, I think we could represent that quality or that personality within you in this way. But even something like I'm looking at what you have on right now, Shawn, you've got a black ring and some tattoos showing, and then
Hmm.
you're in this light blue. The light blue is throwing me off in a good way. It's a plot twist. You
Hmm.
should be, quote unquote, in a black shirt or gray shirt right now.
Hmm.
And so what I would do is I would start to ask you things like, well, do you like to wear pastels? Do you like the contrast that that soft color creates with kind of like that more hard masculine? Because
Hmm.
that's really cool. Like, do we build a brand off of that? Right. And so you start to observe and say, I noticed this. Why is that?
Hmm.
Over and over again until you extract the the contrast is
Hmm.
really what it always comes back to is what's the juxtaposition of who you are and how do we visually represent that? So what do I mean when I say that? Where's the modern meet the classic? Where does the hard meet the soft? Where does the free spirit meet the logical, right? When we can pinpoint those, it creates this very balanced brand that many people can relate to. And I
Mhm.
think it's really cool because they may relate to one half of you and they may need to learn from the other half of you, which is so beautiful.
Mhm. There's so much to take away from there. And one of your specialties that you do is the entire wardrobe visuals, color. I'll preface this. This was a gift. Okay. This is
Yeah.
most of my clothes are gifts or things that I've gotten for free.
Yeah.
That is the majority of my clothes. The ring was also a gift.
Love it.
So everything is a gift, always in a backwards hat, things of that nature. So when I'm looking at all this, we look at age 4, 5, 6. Okay, we can't remember what we were drawn to, but what does it make us? How does it make us feel now?
Mhm.
Now I'm going to try to tie all this in together as best I can.
Yeah.
So when I'm looking at that, now I'm looking at, okay, people have no idea how to sit still. My nutrition clients, 5 minutes of stillness a day on our consistency sheet, right? It's difficult. Um, we have a world where when we look at 4, 5, 6, that's when you were starting to say, okay, that's when all of the inputs from the external world are coming in, right? And so we're not thinking as freely, I'll say. Um, so we've got all these inputs now. We've got social media. That's just a monster of its own, right? And so that's what consumes a lot of people's day. We're consuming, we're not creating.
Yep.
One of the best business practices that you did, getting still, meditating, journaling, figuring out on a deeper level of who you are. When you're even just starting on that path, it feels overwhelming, it feels comfortable. What's going to be the first step to asking yourself the tough questions and getting still with yourself in order to learn more of yourself?
Yeah. I think you're asking for an entry point
Mhm.
of like, this is, yeah, it's
I think the
countercultural.
majority of people, yeah, I think the majority of people struggle to even get to that entry point because they continue these same patterns. They feel
Yep.
shameful of guilt and full of guilt, and then the patterns continue. How can
Yeah.
you start to build any type of stillness in order to learn themselves better? I think a majority of people don't know themselves at all.
Yeah. Oh, that's a mic drop statement that you just made because I agree with you. And what I always say is like when someone does, you can tell. You can feel that. You're like, oof, like you have a presence about you. And so
Mhm,
I hate meditating in silence.
mhm,
It is my least favorite thing to do. And I don't gain a lot from it, which might sound crazy. There are other avenues of personal growth or quiet time that agree with me better. And so just like a diet, you have to find out how can I eat consistently over time? And this is that same thing. If sitting on a cushion, pretzel leg with your palms in the air, listening to tones doesn't do it for you, let's try a different station, right? And some of these other stations, the most accessible because it's a two birds, one stone type of habit, go for a walk with no music and no phone. If you need your phone in the bag for safety reasons, fine. But begin to, it's like the shower thoughts. A lot of people are like, I get the best ideas in the shower. It's because you're not stimulated in the shower, right?
mhm.
It's just you and some white noise, and that's it. And so it's essentially creating that experience for a longer window than a shower would be. Can you even go for a 1 hour nature walk once a week? Because the mind that maybe can't sit still, let's not try and take it from 100 to 0. Let's take it from 100 miles an hour to 25 miles an hour. And the 25 miles an hour might be that walk with no phone. Drives with music. Actually, when the music becomes a distraction, turn it off. At first, it's something that gets me inspired. This is like me personally. I used to do about 2 hours of driving every day in like 30-minute increments. I would put a couple songs on. I would like queue up on Spotify, maybe two, three songs, and then I would turn it off and I would just let it marinate. John Butler Trio, Tosh Sultana, sort of like inspiring music. It's not like country music where I love country music, but it doesn't inspire me. It makes me want to crack a cold one and sit on the porch. Not rap music. Again, makes me want to go lift heavy weights. Something more mellow, right? Iron and Wine is like a great artist to listen to for this kind of stuff. It's like Trevor Hall, I'm just naming a couple of them here, but it's like this mellow music that's just going to help your brain drop a couple octaves and just be a little bit more still. and then turn it off or put on classical or jazz with no words, right? So that you can hear yourself think and giving yourself the space to do that. So drives with, we'll say, no lyric music, walks with no music, no phone, just listening and witnessing, like, how do I actually feel right now?
Mhm.
How do I feel today and why? And what's on my heart? What do I want to share with the world? Like, these very broad questions can lead to so much. Getting in the sauna. Can you get in the sauna for 20 minutes with no music, no phone? Because that is a better form of stillness to me than sitting in my room on a pillow. Like, I just can't do it. Um, Sitting still longer than you've ever sat still. Think to yourself right now, what's the longest I've ever sat still with no device, no laptop, no nothing? And you might be like, 15 minutes without falling asleep. Okay, that's the other part. Cool. Today, for 16 minutes, you're going to go sit or walk in the sun. And after the 16th minute, then you can write down in a voice note on your phone or a journal anything that came up for you. But this period of not even trying to capture it. And then if you have a thought you want to write down, write it down. And journaling is one of those practices for me that I get a lot more out of journaling as a form of stillness than pure stillness.
Mm.
So
So yeah, I think that's very helpful. And I think that that's where at least I saw your answer coming from, right? It's not something that's complicated, but at least something that continues to need to be reiterated. And so if someone from a past episode, if I've asked a similar question, um, then at least if someone's hearing this from you, this may resonate and click that little epiphany bubble for them and push them to go and do it as opposed to someone else. So
yeah,
now, if someone has started to do this and they've started to implement it, and now they're inspired after listening to this, and they want to go and build a personal brand and build this business, and they know what they like. How are you bridging the gap between knowing what you like, doing market research, and bringing those two together?
yeah, I love this question. I also want to say too that this is a keep the iron hot activity. I would rather have you do it every day for 5 to 10 minutes than once a week for an hour, because the more often you visit yourself, the closer you'll feel to yourself. So just a little add
Mhm.
on there. Okay, the question is, how do we bridge this sort of brainstorming energy with something tangible, right?
Mhm.
Okay, cool. So you know yourself. You've even maybe gotten it down to a little slogan or like a flag that you fly, as I like to say, like you're like, rip on life. Yeah, that's it, right? Which, by the way, that took me 4 months of that consistent keep the iron hot practice to get to. Rip on Life came and I was like, that's it. Everything's Rip on Life. That's the whole umbrella over all of it. Once you feel like you've got that overarching theme that you're going for, how do we start to then materialize the how? Because we got the what, and we probably innately know the why. And so now, what's the avenue? What's the driveway that I'm going to pave for people to walk down? In my example here, your house, once they're in your house, they're a paying customer. Without a driveway, they're not going to get to the house because they're not going to bushwhack, right? So it's like, okay, what are all the different ways that I could serve? And I think
Mhm.
even just starting with a big brain dump of I could coach nutrition, I could be a ghostwriter, I could start a gym, I could, right? You might have 2 or 3 distinct skills that you have. Give me all the ways, no holds bar. Like, how could you use that skill set?
Mhm.
Cool. Now, which ways do you actually want to use that skill set? And starting to think about that. And which one of these options do you already in your mind have 2 or 3 people that are like, you're like, oh, they would probably do this. Oh, if I offered this, like Kinsey would for sure say yes, or whatever it is. You know what I mean? I've
Mhm.
always got those people in our network. The one that's going to be the hardest to pull off, not impossible, but the hardest is the one where you go, well, I don't know where those people are that need that, but somebody needs that. That hurdle to break through is so thick because you don't even know one person that needs it. I remember I used to think this when I lived in Philly and I wanted to live in Scottsdale. I'm like, there's definitely some person in Scottsdale that wants me to house sit for them. Cool, but you don't know them. So the chances of that happening, low, right?
Mhm.
However, if you like to do personal training, there's 3 people in your life right now who would definitely let you train them, right?
Mhm.
And they probably definitely have 3 more people that they know, and so on and so forth. So
Mhm.
I think that's a really good place to start is where are you and what's needed in your backyard, because shaking hands will never go out of style,
Mhm.
right? Instagram algorithms change, TikTok came and went, you name it, 100
Mhm.
other social media platforms. It's like, okay, cool. How do I do something that no matter what is happening on the phone, I can still find leads, I can still find contacts, etc. And
Yeah.
a lot of the time, these are like simple things that turn into bigger things. Um, I figured out how to accidentally enroll 12 clients. And then I purposefully enrolled 12 more. Then I started teaching people, right? And so
Mhm.
it's like the documentation of the how behind the simple business that you start might be the business that you scale. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So I talked to a guy yesterday. He owns a mobile dog grooming company. And he's like, I want to have a fleet of 12 trucks because there's no organized ones. They're all solopreneurs. And I want to really sell my system and franchise this thing out. And then I want to be the customer service that calls and schedules the appointments. I was like, I love this. He wouldn't be in a position to do that and scale that if he didn't just start the first truck.
Mhm.
So it's almost a start the first truck analogy of like knowing, okay, what could I do? What do I actually want to do? Do I know 2 or 3 people that need it? Then go talk to those 2 or 3 people.
Mhm.
Do some market research. If I personal trained you, what would be a no-brainer rate? Oh, what are you paying at your gym for personal training? Oh, if I
Mhm.
could do better than that, would you hire me instead? Oh, you
Mhm.
wouldn't. Oh, why do you like to train in the gym instead of in your house? Right? And really asking these questions, just learning about your people. Once you know your people, then you can start to ask yourself questions like, well, what else could I give them?
Mhm.
How else could I serve them? How could
Yeah.
I do this remote if you want to do it remote? Um, but it's really just exploring and going from there. The other thing too is if you maybe let's just say you're in a job. This is a lot of people. You're in a job and you want to do what you do at your job for yourself.
Mm.
Well, that's just a lead gen problem. That's not a
Mhm.
what to do problem. What's the brand going to be? What's the
Mhm.
service going to be? You probably already know.
Mhm.
Okay, cool. How do we find people that are not coming from your job, because you
Mhm.
probably signed a non-compete, to enroll as your clients, right? And then that becomes a different sales conversation.
Mhm.
So I think, is that what you're asking about? It's like, how do we go from brand to offer?
Um, I think I was more looking for, I mean, this is helpful, of course, but
Yeah,
looking more for some of the characteristics, less about like the vehicle, a little bit more of like the
yeah,
characteristics of like who you are, and then looking
yeah.
at the market and selling yourself and bridging those
Okay.
two together. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you're finding your niche almost is what you're talking about of like,
Yeah.
how do I find my vibe of people?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I took the Rip on Life flag
Hmm.
and I started flying it like crazy in my content. Um, and I remember journaling one night and I wrote, this feels like walking through a forest, singing a song, and wondering if anybody knows the words to the song. And one by one, they walk out from behind trees. This was like a vision that I had.
Hmm.
That people walk out from behind different trees that I couldn't see them originally from my original viewpoint. And they start singing the words to my song, almost like a rock star, right? Like
Hmm.
their crowd knows all the lyrics. And I was like, wow, that sounds so cocky to say, but it was like, if I sing my song, somebody, it's going to resonate with somebody, essentially, is what I was being told in this vision.
Hmm.
Sober, by the way, it sounds a little
Hmm.
trippy, but
Hmm.
it was not. It was just me falling asleep one night. And I was like, whoa, this is sweet. The half awake, half asleep state will do wonders for you. Um, and so, really just owning that, starting to talk about that, and creating content that captures what you were trying to say. But this goes back to you have to really sit with the verbiage and the words of extracting the story, extracting the what are you trying to say, and
Hmm.
then what are you inviting people into. So that offer has to be close to follow, right? So creating content in the market on Instagram with your message. And it's hard. It's like hard to put yourself out there. You're like, guys, I've really been thinking Rip on Life is the thing. People are like, what does that mean? And you got to explain it, right? It's like all these awkward conversations of introducing yourself. Once you explain it, though, it starts to grow legs. And I always say your brand message has to be something fiery and contagious because this thing is going to become whisper down the lane. Rip on Life is 3 words.
Hmm.
It's not super difficult to remember. And if we whispered it down the lane, it might stay intact. However, I help other people elevate their gifts, extract their blah, 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 and share them to the world. If that goes whispered down the lane, it's getting botched like the second person, right? So really simple. I just had a client come up with Reclaim Your Stoke. She's a women's health coach. She's talking about vitality. I
Hmm.
love that. It's so easy. Why are we doing this? Because we're reclaiming our stoke. That's the answer to everything. It's the punchline to everything. Once you have that central thing, start to talk about the implications of what it would actually mean to rip on life, or what it would actually mean to reclaim your stoke, or Chase Tillison, what it would mean to rewrite reality. What does that actually mean? And it could mean 100 different things, but the heart of the message stays intact, and it will pull people out of the woodwork, but it's vulnerable. You're an artist. You're creating, hoping that someone's going to like your work. And I also think getting into conversations, people love to relate with one another. I mean, we're human beings, we are connection-based creatures. And so it's like creating those things and those opportunities for yourself to say, do you mind if I share with you what I've been excited about lately with your close friends, right? Dude, I think this is super cool. Oh, you know, I should introduce you to my other friend. Da, da, da. He needs you in his life. That's happened to me 100 times too, right? So open your mouth is really what it comes back to.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes it much more clear for me. And then
Yeah.
we'll take this little, we'll say blurb, and then take the last little blurb, put them together,
Put them
and that
together.
answers all of your questions, right? And so
Yeah.
before we get into the last question here, I'd love to just hear where we can find you, work with you, if you have anything going on right now that we should hear about.
Yeah, absolutely. So at Maximum Potency is my Instagram. And then stan.store, stan.store/maximum potency will always have the latest freebies, the latest offerings, all the things. We are enrolling right now for Offer Oasis. That enrollment's going to start in about a week. And that is a 6-week mini mind with Chase Tellison and I both coaching on how to create your low, mid, high, and continuing offers for a sustainable business. And I'll just say really quick, what I'm seeing in the space right now is that offerings are needing to shift, even with those 7-figure business owners like I was talking about. And we're essentially teaching you how to make that pivot so that you have an offer suite that you know is rock and roll, and it's not your offers that are the problem, right? It's eliminating these variables. And so that will be starting on the week of June 3rd. So we're super excited about that. And then I
Oh,
have the Maximum Potency podcast if you love hearing me talk. We talk
beautiful.
every week. So good.
Okay, sweet. So our last question is a question from the last guest. So this is from
Love it.
Daniel Yours. And when you die, what is something you want people to say about you?
Hmm. I mean, that I ripped on life. It's my simple
Can be that
answer.
simple. Yeah.
Um, Yeah, I always joke around that I'm probably gonna die in like a shark attack or like jumping out of a plane or something crazy because it's like that's how I would go. It'll probably be something really stupid like that, and that's how my dad passed as well. Not shark, but a Harley accident. And so it's like, yeah, it'll probably be one of those things where it's like that checks out. Either that or I'll be like 105 and just super old, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, rip on life. Like I want people to say that I was full of life, that I was always living in my purpose. And it's like I can't not live in my purpose because it literally makes me sick.
Mhm.
And just living from that aligned place of joy and vibrancy, right?
Mhm.
Like a stoke for life for what you're doing.
Mhm.
And I always say, stay stoked. And so
Yep.
like friends will always be like, what's up? I'm stoked to see you. I'm like, did you say that word on purpose? You know, and it's being in love with the human experience and creating that juicy life that you can't wait to wake up to. And I hope that I've always been able to embody that and or I'm going to be able to continue to embody that for the rest of my days.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I hope that someone finds some inspiration that they may need from listening to this today. So, Lyssa,
Yeah.
thank you very much for being here.
100% Shawn. Thank you for having me.
Beautiful.